Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to N5B Radio's Cosmic Awakening Show, where we are serving this galaxy and beyond. My name is Michelle Walling, and I'll be your host for the next few hours. And in case this is your first time with us, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a certified holistic life coach, helping people see the bigger picture to help them heal themselves holistically. And I'm also an author, guest writer, and admin for N5D.com. I also have a website where I post all of my articles and all the radio shows, and it's called CosmicStarseeds.com, and thus the name for my show, Cosmic Awakening Show. And just in my spare time, I also have another radio show called BMSS Radio, and that stands for Body, Mind, Soul, Spirit.com, where I discuss the topics that they have on bodymindsoulspirit.com, which is another one of Greg's wonderful sites. And I do that one on Blog Talk Radio on Sundays. I haven't had like an ongoing schedule. Just whenever I have too many things going on with the Cosmic Awakening Show, I kind of have I do shows on the other one, just to be able to fit everybody in, because we're going through some exciting times right now. There's a lot of people wanting to share their stories. And the goal here is to reach as many people as possible with the information, because information is power. And tonight I have a very special co-host, and I'm excited to bring on India Irie Sanatana. No, I screwed that one up. Dharma. Hi, India.
Hi, Angel. You did a brilliant job. Good try.
Tell me what this four-name name is. What does it mean?
It's actually a Hindi term that actually, in short, means the return to the ancient and very basic ways of balance and caring for one another, the ways before we got contaminated with greed. Balance, unity, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. I love it.
Well, my name actually, I just figured out the other day that my name kind of has 1111 in it. Michelle has 2 L's in it, and Walling has 2 L's in it. And I was looking at it the other day, and the 1111 popped out. And I thought, well, that was pretty cool.
And, that's a symbol for gates. 2 ones together is like a gate. So you've got 2 gates in your name. That's kind of nifty.
Yeah, the gateway. Yeah. Well, I'm saving one for Greg.
That's even better. That's delicious.
Now, you and I met on Facebook, and what really attracted me to your page was you have this wonderful way of putting these beautiful pictures together with sayings and memes. And I remember when I first started out on Facebook, I was like, India, where are you getting all these wonderful pictures? And you really inspired me to put out a lot of pictures. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's part of my love. I feed off the love that I get from social media.
Yeah. So you and I are basically Facebook friends. We've never met in person. I understand you just moved to Colorado from sunny Florida. Is that correct?
Yes. Ouch.
Yeah.
It's a fine time of year to be doing it too, because it's cold and it's shocking. So it's like both feet in. I'm fully in this.
Well, I'm actually moving to Florida, so we kind of are crossing, like, hey, India, see ya, you're going.
We keep missing each other, yes.
Tonight I'm in Texas, but it has been a beautiful day today, but it's been really cold and rainy several days in a row. And we're getting our last fall rain, which is good because we haven't had too much of a drought here this year. But listen, I appreciate you broadcasting tonight dualistically on your radio show called Expanding You Radio. And it's a pleasure to bring you on to share your energy with our listeners. So I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for asking me. I appreciate that.
And tonight I'd also like to give a very special thanks to our sponsor, Greg Prescott, who is our radio show host at N5D Radio that makes my show possible. And Greg is also the webmaster at N5D.com, which is the world's hottest esoteric, metaphysical, and spiritual database on the Internet. And N5D.com is ranked in the top 25,000 websites in the world. That's a really good achievement to be in the top 25,000 in the world out of I don't know how many websites, maybe even a billion, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of them. I would also like to remind everybody that they can follow N5D by liking and following on the N5D Facebook page. I am an admin on that page, and I try to keep up with the messages, and I also try to advertise each upcoming Cosmic Awakening show on that page, so you can know when to tune in next. And Greg updates the N5D news page every day. He peruses the alternative news and picks out some of the favorite headlines of his and updates the news page, so you can check that out by clicking on the news tab from N5D.com. You'll find a new article on N5D every day along with the alternative news. So he's busy at work, but he's also resurrected a beautiful site that I love called bodymindsoulspirit.com, and he updates that every day with not only one article but several articles. So in order to keep up with that, you can either find them on this is a little confusing, but you can find them on the N5D Facebook page. We share them there. Or Body, Mind, Soul, Spirit also has its own Facebook page. Or you can go to bodymindsoulspirit.com and you can actually sign up for an email which will have each new article dropped in your inbox for you. So just find that at the top right-hand part of the home page, and you just enter your email address for that. And a special shout-out to my Facebook friends, my Facebook groups, and, of course, our cosmic family listening tonight. India and I actually have a couple of great groups together, so I thought I'd mention those tonight. Special shout-out to Awaken to the Shift, the group, the 21st Century Superhuman Quantum Lifestyle. I like the group that I just joined recently called Question Everything. Been following 1111 Awakening Code for a while. World Peace is a really great group. Of course, Expanding You, and celebrating our divine, feminine, and masculine. And the last group that I just wanted to say hi to tonight is Friend the World, for we are one. And I want to thank all these people who start these groups and these pages to allow us to come together and share information, especially like the information that we're sharing tonight, because we live in a time right now where everything is upside down and backwards, and we really need to question everything that's going on around us. We need to be aware of what's happening, and that is why I'm really, I get really excited to bring this information to you by radio and as well through my articles, because the more information we have, of course, the more power we have to do something about it, because we've had our memories wiped and we don't know what the hell's going on. I'm currently in Facebook jail. I can't post to any of my beautiful groups. So if you're wondering what's happened to me, well, there you go. And I'm okay. I've got a lot of work to do around the house. I'm trying to get ready to sell my house to join Greg at the at the N5D headquarters in Sarasota, Florida. So I want to give thanks tonight to all those who have helped me continue to share articles from N5D and BMSS on our groups. Hello to everybody in the chat room tonight, to Bren, and let's see, to Greg. Greg's in the chat room. If you'd like to be a part of our chat room tonight to ask a question, if you're too shy to call in, you simply scroll down to the bottom of the Blog Talk Radio page, and then you sign in. It doesn't cost anything. You just, if you haven't ever signed in before, you just have to make a username and password. It's that simple. And you can log in there. And so this week's topic is a wonderful topic after Halloween, of course. It's about relationship vampires and the dark side of Cupid. And our guest tonight is going to be Eve Lorgen, and we'll be taking calls if we have any callers. We haven't had any callers in quite a while on my show, but if you do really have something you'd like to talk about or even just comment, in the second hour of our show, I'll be looking to see if anybody is in the queue yet. The number is 646-716-8890. Just want to have a few more things to say before I jump in there with you, India, and we bring Eve on, and that is that there's an article that we posted on N5D from Eve's website, and it's called How to Recognize Characteristics of Reptilian Possessed and Hybrids. And it was a very popular article because actually when you read it, it's very lengthy but well worth it, because when you read it, it may be shocking to you to realize that a lot of our friends or, maybe our ex-husbands or ex-wives actually had a lot of those characteristics. So, India, I just wondered if you have had actually a relationship that you could relate to, when I know that you've heard of Eve before and studied her materials. So I was just wondering if you've been in that kind of situation where you realized, oh shit, I think that person was basically possessed.
I think that was like the first half of my life, to be honest. Really, I was paging through the article and reading that, and then I went on to read the other one about the person who had the experience with her husband at the strip clubs and all of that, and I was just astounded at the level of resonance that came from those articles, because a lot of times you have suspicions that something's off, but when you start letting your mind wrap around these things that are just floating out there for you to get, I know me personally, you try to brush it under the rug, maybe there's something I can do to fix, but literally, I'm 45 years old, and the first half of my life, if not the first 30 years, were spent in relationships that were emotionally, energetically, spiritually, financially draining in every possible box you can tick. So, yes, I've experienced that. And it's probably some of them are to the level of some of those that are mentioned in the article.
Well, yeah, not as bad as that, but, it's great, though, as we are moving up in our consciousness, that we can look back at our lives and understand certain situations. And, there's a lot of people that may say we needed to learn lessons from this or that or the other. And I think in my life that's quite bullshit, because I think it's bullshit, because I basically think that we are under the black magic spell of beings who are basically, puppeting everybody on the planet. So,
but personally, I feel like all of those things it's like holding my feet to the fire, and they have triggered power that I didn't know that I had in me, survivalist sort of, I guess, mechanisms that forced me to know my own individuality, my own courage, my own soul, things that I knew that I wanted, even if I wasn't sure what I wanted in detail. I knew what showed me what I didn't want. It showed me ways that I didn't want to behave to people. So there's a gem in everything, whether I hoped to come here and incarnate and experience it on that level. I can't speak to that because I don't think I would have planned that for myself. However, It has given me access to tools that were forgotten for years as I slept here on this planet.
Oh, I agree that a lot of those, being in the dark night of the soul most of my life has caused my grand awakening, and maybe that's what we needed to wake up. But I really wished I could have done it a little different way. But I'm strong. Yeah, I'm strong now. I'm ready to take on the world. And I'd like to just go ahead and bring Eve into our conversation. Eve Lorgen is an author, researcher, and consultant in anomalous trauma. And she works a lot with MyLab people and or MeLab, or however you say that. Basically people who. She also works with people who have been possessed and have had these alien love bites. She's an author of a book about that subject, and let's get her on the show with us. And I'd like to say a special welcome tonight to Eve Lorgen. Welcome to the Cosmic Awakening Show.
Oh, good evening. Thank you for having me on. There's a lot to talk about. I could already tell.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you.
And I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight, because I have a question from the chat room right away that's a little interesting, and this is from Bryn. And I don't think I've heard you talk about this before, Eve. She would like to know if someone has a child with someone possessed by a reptilian, what concerns are there regarding the child? And if you wouldn't mind just talking about that, and then we'll go into basically how you got started and everything, and we'll take it from the top after that, because that's a really important question for Bryn to hear tonight.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, I definitely have worked with people who, let's say, we were born and raised in families that I call certain bloodline families, where one of their parents was like hosted by a non-human entity. Sometimes they would call it reptilian. It could have been something else, but that's basically how it's recognized clairvoyantly and through the behaviors of a lot of the things that have been described in earlier articles that you mentioned, actually, like the reptilian hosting and possession traits and identifiers, and the psychopathy and the narcissism kind of behaviors. So really, you have to look at that and see, well, if that's present. And I wouldn't say it necessarily means it's going to come in the child. And it really depends on how the child is observed in terms of how it's growing up. And if you keep that child in the presence of a lot of love and healthy, raising them in a healthy way, it's not likely to have a lot of problems unless it's being abused. The only caveat I would say is that there's always a possibility that what I call generational spirits can be passed on through bloodlines or people who have entities. So that's something to watch for, and there are methods to remove these kinds of things in different traditions. So it depends on, one's faith. So I'm not going to say what faith to use, but, if you think that's an issue, I would, take it to someone who's a spirit releasement person or a shaman or somebody like a holographic kinetics practitioner, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for answering that. Great. So back to the introduction of Eve Lorgen. What is anomalous trauma? And tell us a little bit about your beginnings, and we'll get right into the dark side of Cupid love connections and how to recognize them. And then later on in the show, we'll be talking about what we can do about that. Okay.
Well, it all began. Let's see. It's a kind of long story, but I actually had experiences of my own in my own life, childhood, as well as teen and adult years with anomalous things, paranormal experiences, alien abductions, and that kind of thing. And so I sought out to understand not only my experiences, but to learn more about others, as well as going through my own healing and recovery process, which actually takes a long time, to do something like that. So I learned a lot through doing support groups for people who've had alien abductions and related experiences, which I kind of term under anomalous trauma, which could be like alien abductions, the classic kinds of experiences you hear about, or it could be mind control, ritual abuse, paranormal interference in many different ways. Could be near-death experiences, could be ghostly spirit visitations, unusual things like that. Could be ritual abuse, could be narcissistic abuse. So it could actually cover a wide range of things, although primarily most of my work is with people who've had the alien abduction experience, or what I call the MILAB or military abduction kind of experience, which may include alien or ET elements in their experiences, as well as people who have what I call paranormal interference factors in their lives and especially in their love relationships. So that's actually what I'm focusing more on now in terms of how to identify it, how to deal with it, and what are the solutions that we can have to empower ourselves to really take our own power back and become aware but not be all paranoid about it, I mean, I think there are solutions to this, and there's no reason to be afraid or to spread any kind of fear, and it's not my intention at all. So after saying that, I want to say that I learned a lot through my own support group that I did out of Southern California in San Diego County in, I guess it was the mid to late 90s, and I continued with that, corresponding with a colleague named James Bartley, and I think you might have had him on your show, I don't know, but he and I were basically students of the late Dr. Carla Turner, and we were close with Barbara Bartholick, who is a hypnotherapist, or who was a hypnotherapist, who worked with alien abductees for, something like 30 years. So we got a lot of, teaching and learning from Barbara Bartholick and our own observations. And so Barbara Bartholick was the one who really helped me recognize different aspects of what we were seeing within the alien abduction experience, and that was the aspect of what she called the love obsession, or the drama of a love obsession that was being somehow orchestrated and manipulated in these people's lives by their supposed alien handlers. So I wrote the book called The Love Bite, which is about case histories of people who've had relationship orchestrations set up in many different ways by who they thought were, let's say, the aliens who were the ones in their case, like the ones who were interacting with them throughout many visitations or abductions. So that was pretty clear that this did happen, and the aliens were definitely responsible for many things that go beyond the standard alien abduction experience with the medical exams and that kind of thing. There's much more that happens in the lives of these people that are on actually non-physical realms, like astral realms, for example, or dream hacking, or being tested for their emotional responses in a variety of conditions that are orchestrated or staged in their lives. So I got to get that understood and really observed over a number of years, which actually led to the second book called The Dark Side of Cupid, and that one's about love affairs, the supernatural, and the energy vampirism aspect, which is really the predominant thing that was basically being observed in all of this, and that it wasn't necessarily aliens or ETs who are responsible for these people's relationship manipulations where there's a vampirism issue going on, but there were what I call interdimensional beings or extra-dimensional beings, or some alien beings like reptilians who observed as being responsible for the vampirism itself. So this kind of goes into, understanding what's going on in a paranormal bird's-eye view of relationship interference and the energy vampirism dynamic that happens when you're in a relationship, let's say, with a partner who is kind of a psychic vampire, and if they're overshadowed by an entity or even possessed by one. So in that book, I go through several case studies from the more benign and the less damaging ones to the extremely damaging vampirism cases. So that will give you an idea of really looking at it from a different perspective, looking actually more deeply into what's really happening in that dynamic from a clairvoyant perspective as well as an energetic one.
I'd like to jump in and ask you a question, Eve. Now, for the listeners who might not be familiar with the phenomenon or might be newly hearing this kind of information and say, well, maybe this sounds like something that, resonates to what's going on currently in my life situation, how would one begin to sort out the difference between a naturally occurring emotional vampire that we come across like more often than not in our workplaces or our friendship relationships, or something that we should be a little bit more concerned about that's coming from a place maybe externally controlling or contributing to this being?
That's a very good question. That's actually something that I covered in The Dark Side of Cupid when I went over, let's say, the basics of what emotional vampirism is versus psychic vampirism, and then what I call the continuity from the lesser kind of cases and then into the more serious cases. And in emotional vampirism, it's really could be anything like somebody who does emotional dumping, or they get very caught up in talking about their problems or creating unnecessary dramas in their lives, relationships, or workplace. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have an entity, and it could be that they have unresolved wounds from their own life in their heart, where if they stay disconnected to a part of themselves through trauma, for example, that disconnect and that numbness could make them want to seek out and crave the emotional energy and intensity in order to get that life force back in their life from an external source. So it's like they're outsourcing their emotional energy. So that could be a simply human-mediated thing based on their own unhealed wounds and their disconnect from their own core and their soul from just simple trauma. And this could be actually more exacerbated, but like in what I call an Axis 2 personality disorder, which would be, from a psychologist's perspective, that would be someone who has a personality disorder where the personality character was actually created earlier in life from a deeper type of wound at an earlier age or developmental stage. So these things are actually more severe, and you'd see that in things like narcissistic personality disorder, for example, sociopathic ones. Sometimes borderline and histrionic personality disorders will have those kinds of characteristics. So that's my answer for that one.
And don't you think that we should fall back on our own personal tools of resonance that we have? You know what I mean? We've got the chakra system. We are all energy, and I feel like if more of us, especially as women, but all of us really as human beings, need to pay attention to those inner signals, because I know, as Michelle asked me, did I experience these kinds of succubus sort of relationships? And I always felt like it was wrong, but it seems like our urge is to run into that burning building and to keep going back for more. And I think we need to be able to look at that and see where are we on the scale with this, and what's our gut telling us, and why aren't we listening?
Very good. Oh, it's so true that I call those things like red flags, and being able to identify a red flag if something is quite not right in a relationship and you're really tuning into that, but maybe on a gut instinct there's no words for it. It's just this feeling or something very slight, but that's something that we should listen to, because oftentimes that is right, and that's something that will tell us whether or not maybe this relationship or this date or this person or this job is really not for me. There's something not quite right. So really listening to those kinds of feelings is very, very important in terms of learning how to set appropriate boundaries so that these kind of relationships don't have to happen. So really, one of the things I talked about in The Dark Side of Cupid, and it has to do with the healing modalities and the solutions and the therapy, that a lot of times people who ends up in these, let's say, as a pattern that over and over again with, let's say, you end up with psychopaths all the time. And it could be because of early abuse, where in your childhood family of origin there may have been abuse where certain behaviors are normalized, let's say like alcoholism or incest or just good old-fashioned emotional abuse or physical abuse. And so sometimes these things are normalized to the state where they grow up having to shut down feelings in order to survive. And even though they may be out of that family of origin and don't even want a relationship like that, they still are numbed out at a certain level in their own emotional bodies, so that it's like it doesn't work. The red flags don't work because it's numbed out too far. So it's like then you believe what you want to believe about somebody who's so charming, and it turns out they're a friggin' psychopath. And they don't know why.
And then a lot of people have no self-worth, so they don't even realize, like, what you're receiving, A, is less than what you deserve and what your value is, but B, this isn't what's going on everywhere. And I literally have come across people who don't seem to realize that. They think this is normal, just like you said. This behavior has become, I'm inoculated to it now, so just carry on in that drone state.
It's amazing how that happens, and it's really because if we've had a family of origin where we've had abuse or a long-term marriage, you get to normalize what it's like to not be loved and not be respected, so you really don't even know what true love is. And I run into people who are survivors of abuse where they really literally have never felt love in their life. They never knew what that was, so they don't understand, like, if somebody keeps treating them coldly or badly, they don't understand why someone's doing that, and they keep coming back for more, hoping that the outer facade is going to be true, but the behaviors, prove themselves that this person is, like, mean, like, stay away from them. But they don't know because they've normalized this ghetto of an emotional life from their family.
And I've seen also, and I know we've got some similarities in having the background, with those people who've been victimized by, and I really don't like to use the victimized, but I'll say have been at the hand of SRA, satanic ritual abuse, where they use a technique called love bombing, where you're given love and love and love, and then love is taken away, and that same person who loved you so dearly is now your abuser, and they become identified with that as a sense of normalcy, and they don't understand, well, if you love me, that means you're going to hurt me eventually. Just go ahead and do it. This is what life is.
Or that's just how they are. They can't help it, or the enabling kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, that happens. It's like the Stockholm Syndrome is a programming towards the Stockholm Syndrome so that you accept and think that love has to happen with abuse, when, in fact, it does not. And it should not, really, at all.
Absolutely.
Now, these beings are actually harvesting energy from us through our emotional body. And, Eve, you know about and you've written about these beings that act as Cupid, that set two people up and have these amazing synchronistic experiences that bring them together, and where they actually are setting them up for basically a tumultuous relationship so that they can feed off of the energies of that couple. Can you tell us a little bit about this Cupid type relationship, setting things up?
Okay. Well, the first way of me understanding this basic hypothesis really came with the alien love bite case histories, where the same kind of thing was happening, except it was, let's say, the alien handlers putting together two people who were usually both abductees, or at least one, and put them together with a targeted partner. Although in those cases it wasn't always, sometimes the agenda may not necessarily appear to be energy vampirism. It could be for another agenda, and they appeared to be more victims of this. Whereas in the dark side of Cupid, it's more like there's an interdimensional being that is overshadowing maybe one person more than the other, and that being is actually the one responsible for a lot of the disruption. But it is as if they definitely are being set up, and behind the scenes, it's almost like these entities that could play us like puppets and literally interconnect people with one another if they have those connections and put them together, and then feed off the energy like middlemen carrying out a business deal. They're just the ones linking into the life source and then feeding off that connection. And the best way to get this life force is to go through a lot of emotional highs and crashing lows, as well as amplified sexual energy, because that has a lot of energy to it as well.
I would like to ask you to expound on that just a little bit more, if you would, because as Michelle mentioned, we do a lot of conversations, and I do series on celebrating the divine energies, the masculine, the feminine, and often the conversation steers around to Tantra and the life force energy that is recognized by ancient traditions going back as far as we can remember, with the Sumerians and the Egyptians, with the anking of this energy. And I know currently there are some shadow societies that still capitalize on certain times of the year and the alignments of celestial bodies to usurp this sexual energy. Talk to us about what power is contained therein, and what is it that's so that's at work here when sexual energy is at play or it released or accessed?
Very good question. I actually did a lot of studying on that because I wanted to understand what was going on, because I felt like it was definitely beyond emotional energy, but emotional energy was part of it. And it seemed to me through observation of the cases where there were, let's say, the reptilian interdimensional beings reported, there was a high element of what I call the Kundalini activation factor that was happening sometimes these would happen with, let's say, a female abductee. It could be a MILAB, where she had a interaction with a reptilian interdimensional or physical being, depending on the situation, where this type of being was basically they're experts at amplifying and activating the Kundalini sexual energy, sometimes to unnatural degrees like complete Kundalini activation. And then sometimes it could be unpleasant. Other times it could be very blissful and pleasant. It's just that they're manipulating it. So they could be manipulating for someone and then have another partner. You link up with another partner and then feed off it through that partner. So I think it has to do with what I call they call it the Shakti, which is based on the sexual energy of the Kundalini rising from the base chakra. And when it stays at the lower levels, at the lower chakras, it stays in a more primal state that they can use. So they want to try to keep it from actually going to the higher chakras and levels like one would do, let's say, in a safe practice of, I don't know what they would call it, tantra, but like certain meditation practices where they move the energy up, like in Kundalini yoga, where they try to manage it to go up into the higher centers under control. So I think that's a practice that many different traditions try to do. It's mostly known in the Vedic traditions and the Kundalini yoga type of traditions. But there's other traditions like Taoist alchemical sexual practices, which are probably actually safer and better to do and more manageable. But the question always remains is how do you protect this from these energy vampire beings who more often than not, what we discovered is that they're usually like the head entity in charge of a particular guru, you know? And so a lot of my clients were people who were, let's say, students of, high-level gurus and supposed spiritual teachers who were involved in these tantric practices, and they ended up, with a friggin' reptilian attached to them that was maybe attached to the guru or teacher who was using their sexual energy. So you have to be really, really careful with this kind of thing because the energy is real and it is very powerful, but it's also being used and co-opted by either humans or humans who are, let's say, hosted or controlled by these higher level beings that are still feeding on that energy. So this goes into a study of like, wait a minute, so what's really behind religions? Who are the false gods? Who are the ones we can trust, and, who are these deities really and what are they really doing? Because more often than not, we're finding that they're feeding on humans, all in the guise of spiritual enlightenment. So I'm not saying that all these traditions are bad and have this kind of corruption, but I could say a hell of a lot of them do.
Oh, yeah. I think they've been all pretty much co-opted, to some extent. I do believe there's a divine, and when I say divine, it's not secular. I mean something that is just universal truth that's embedded within each of them, which is why I found studying them all sort of superimposes that truth and it shakes clear so that you can see it instead of trying to be pigeonholed into one and following all that dogma, doctrine, and all those rules and regulations. It's stymieing to a being,
Yeah, and it's just amazing. There's a lot of different practices from different traditions, but if you try to boil it down to like the pure essence of what it really is, it really boils down to the life force energy that's basically in human beings that can be accessed through the sexual energy. And there could be like male energy, female energy, or the yin and the yang, and then what we call the primordial, which is the more purified, balanced energy, which is really the energy that you want if you want to go for this whole enlightenment and longevity thing. It's the primordial energy. That's the balance between the two is what you want. It's just a matter of being able to do this safely without the corruption aspects that's involved with a lot of lineages and practices, which are usually this is what I'm studying now, actually. I'm glad you brought the question up because it seems to me, from what I've observed, is so many of these have been, I would say, co-opted and controlled by a lot of the patriarchal agendas and belief systems and repression of women or exploitation of them as an energy source for their spiritual practices. And so this is why I question a lot of it now, because you have to look at, who are the false gods who are hiding behind these patriarchal traditions, and why the need for patriarchy itself? Because to me, that's the whole disempowering thing. that's how you destroy and oppress and control an entire race or a species.
Yep.
So you have to look behind, well, wait a minute, who's the head of these spiritual practices, and why do they have to do what they're doing, and where's the energy really going?
Absolutely. And why is it costing me money?
Or why do they have to exploit women? And there's always these practices that are geared towards men, but you find little about women, but they sure as hell use them. And
absolutely.
so it's like women have to be a lot wiser in how they approach these things, because I think ultimately women are very, very aware of these energies. We're naturally more sensitive and have a sense of expansive awareness as part of being that yin feminine energy. And we both have both qualities in us, but really it's that intuition that we need to listen to and highly value and not downplay in terms of what is our gift as women. We have this expansive awareness and sensitivity that is really, really good and that should be listened to and highly valued as something that is actually concrete. In fact, my last article, it was several articles ago in my website, and you mentioned it actually earlier, was the Reptilian Hosting and Strip Club article. There's a part 1 and a part 2. Okay, so the part 2 is actually an update that I did recently with a woman who had been married for like 23 years, and it was actually a long story, but to make a long story short, her husband ended up getting hosted by one of these reptilian entities that acted as a psychic vampire, as well as just creating misery in her life. And so she woke up to the fact and, did her healing and recovery, but discovered that she actually even had a health issue as a result of the vampirism that happened on an energetic level that was scientifically found. But it was her awareness that actually helped cure the solution instead of falling victim to it. And it was her and other women in her community, which because of their heightened awareness and their meditation practices and their listening to their intuition about all of this, they were able to identify people in their community and these corrupt businesses that were trying to move in and take over their community with these like toxic businesses to mind control their community and just use their community as puppets. So they were able to go to these town meetings and basically just their presence in these meetings were able to offset the mind control field that these really malevolent, corrupted business people, who were hosted, by the way, they were hosted reptilian people who were trying to implement these corrupt businesses in their community. So I guess the point I wanted to make was that it was the women who were the aware ones who were able to make the changes and implement the energetic field to offset the mind control that was going on in their town meetings and locally in their community.
Return of the divine feminine.
Unless you're really, really aware, you have no idea that these kinds of things are going on, not only in relationships, but in terms of, what businesses are moving into your community and trying to make laws, to pass laws, to do things that get your community even more corrupt or polluted or mind controlled or whatever. So the really
micro is the macro, like on every level of our society. And I love that when you introduced yourself, when you started speaking, you emphasized the fact that this needs to be taken as data, just as sheerly as information, and not to be a source of fear, because I think it's scarier to me, it's more frightening to be walking around unawares, but to have the information to say, okay, if that exists and it can be used for my detriment, I can also access that very same level of power, the energy that we all are, and use it in the opposite direction instead of saying, oh, no, now I've learned this. What am I meant to do now? I have to go in the bunker and buy supplies and cat food and water. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't know what to do when they swallow that red pill. They want to spit it back out sometimes and go back to sleep, but there's no power in that.
Yeah, and I think it's, what I see is some people are not ready. Like a lot of people have blinders on, so to speak, and I think it's because they're psychologically, emotionally, spiritually not ready to hear it, or they'll have such a degree of cognitive dissonance that they can't hear it, and they have to basically shut that awareness down. So there's a lot of people with real shut down awareness, probably because they don't have this internal strength to handle it, or maybe they don't have a viable solution so that it's not even safe to know that information yet. So you really have to have a solution.
I think a lot of people, a lot of people are caught under the black magic spell of programming right now with everything that's being fed to us through our water and food and the air and everything else to keep them in that state. So they just are just like dumbed out, and they don't have any fight left in them at all.
That's so true. It's like a war on consciousness and energy, and it's such an amazing thing, but you don't know until you step away from it or actually gather your energy and your awareness and let's say heal and recover from one of these bad relationships, because they take so much out of you that it actually takes a long time to recover from narcissistic abuse. And I would never take that kind of experience lightly. It is very difficult to heal from something like that. And that, you know, the woman who I was talking about in the Reptilian strip club thing, actually the medical condition she had extremely low levels of iron in her blood. She was like extreme anemia to the point of like being very, very ill. And when she went to the doctor, they said, you know, this is so low, we're going to have to give you blood transfusion with some kind of, they wanted to give her like an artificial blood product, which she didn't feel good about. And the doctor kept trying to impose this on her, saying that she needed like daily transfusions for months just to recover. But her intuition told her, no, this is not right. This is they're trying to get rid of her. And so she didn't do that. She didn't want to get the artificial blood, knowing that, you know, your spirit's in the blood. Why do you want all this artificial crap in your system? And what are they going to put in there, you know? So she didn't do it and ended up recovering in less than 2 months from a very severe anemia, which, you know, from the doctor's opinion, should have taken, 13 months to recover from with all these transfusions. But it was the effect of being a vampire from the vampire husband who was a host.
Right.
So it's a real physical thing here. You know, this is not some just energetic thing. I mean, she had physical effects.
Right. I mean, anything that's caught in your emotional body, in your energy field, can manifest in the physical. That's what dis-ease is in our bodies. And as far as strip clubs go, you know, I read that article as well. I found it very interesting. You talked about how the malevolent energies on the other side of the veil, these multidimensional beings, they put these vortexes or these, what do you call these things that they put on top of the strip club buildings, and to be able to not only siphon energy out, but to be able to, you know, people that go out party, they have a few drinks in them, and they start getting in that mood to sit and watch, you know, a woman take their clothes off. You know, that husband that's out there doing that, that's bringing those, you know, reptilians back home. What was that energy box or whatever that they put over the top of the strip club?
Things that she described, and it was like a funnel technology, like a funnel shape, energy shape that had concentric circles that went up to an apex that somehow was actually underneath an interdimensional UFO, and that there were energies being fed from the UFO into the funnel, which was placed over a particular architectural structure, like the dome shape of the bank and also the strip club in this particular case. But I had other people actually report to me who had read this article say that they saw the same thing. And when they saw this funnel kind of cone technology over their house, they experienced extreme psychic attacks at that time, and where there was like a interdimensional UFO close by, and then they're beaming some kind of weird technology over their home, and then just shooting in all kinds of negative energy, because this person was a powerful healer who was helping heal people, and, you know, basically seeing these entities for what they were. So they were basically doing massive psychic attacks. But in this woman's case, there was courting going on that she felt had to do with the architecture of the building itself and how it moves through the wiring system as well, and as well as the funnel thing that was over the building. And so it helped to court up people to what she felt was some kind of artificial intelligence technology that was linked into the reptilian. She saw a reptilian ship, so she was clairvoyantly able to perceive that there was like a reptilian sitting on this ship, right, above the funnel, above the strip club and the bank, and then this reptilian was sitting in a ship looking at a whole bunch of different monitor computer screens, where each computer screen was basically a monitor of a particular individual who had been corded up by this technology. So it's like a big experiment where they were just like watching all these people and then probably indirectly able to, beam in God knows what, like thoughts and compulsions and different things once they were corded up to the technology. So to further add to that, she did mention something called a white box technology, and she saw this somehow associated with, it's kind of weird, but with when she first saw that her husband basically came back from a strip club in New Orleans, I think it was, what the sign was, it was like clairvoyantly the sign of it was this iguana lizard thing hanging around on his shoulder. But really that wasn't how the entity really manifested. It was like what she called a neon sign of the announcement that he was now basically theirs. Basically, he was already like corded up. And that this iguana neon sign thing on his shoulder was linked up somehow psychically in her vision to this white box thing, which was responsible for the initial setup and the swiping of his memory. So it had some kind of technology in it that affected his consciousness and his memory of how it all happened. And it seemed to happen in like a strip club in New Orleans, and then he kept frequenting strip clubs over the years until he just got fully changed over time. So it was pretty sad, but it seemed like that this was like something that was technologically aided as opposed to, let's say, the more organic process of getting possessed. And this can happen. It's actually reported by many people that I talk to that, somebody just has one of these things that's more of an organic connection. And so the woman said, in reality, what this entity really looked like was a drawing that was done by this French clairvoyant that I have also on my website, where this French clairvoyant and energy healer, he didn't know anything about alien abductions or reptilians the way that it's known in the UFO literature, but he was able to clairvoyantly perceive these lizard-type entities, which were very much larger and taller than the human, usually overshadowing from behind and linking into certain lower chakras. So that's really how it's observed by a clairvoyant person. They usually see it in their third eye as a being overshadowing them from behind, and sometimes you could see them linking into certain chakras, the ones that are being manipulated. And that's how they're siphoning in on the energy as well, using that person as a conduit, right, as an energy vampire.
Right. So. And, they probably use porn as well to, is there anything encoded actually in the video itself, or is it basically the fact that you're opening yourself up to that, you're opening yourself up to them?
I think it's both, based on what I've heard recently in interviews, as well as I put up some video clips of a man named Jonathan Adampants, who's somebody who spoke at length, several talks on videos on YouTube back in 2007, 2008 about his awakening process and all the things that he discovered when the veil was lifted. And so part of his talks mentioned subliminal programming and hypnotic neurolinguistic programming that happens not only in audio but in video, subliminally, and onto internet, especially in visual ways, like words that always promote sex or disconnecting you from creator spirit and then perverting, sexual things. So in porn, it would be very, very huge. There's basically mind control programming going straight through to the viewer who's doing that, and then their energy is literally being fed to the entities that are, basically feeding on this in another dimensional reality. So it's just a direct linking in to these entities and what he calls the cancer consciousness.
Speaking of that, that's a good segue. I have a question about another mode that I find is becoming prevalent among people in my social circles. There are a lot of people that are tinkering now in the subtle energy skills and that are, experiencing or experimenting with lucid dreaming, astral projection, that sort of phenomenon, and liking to take jaunts, off into the lower astral realms, which is usually the first place that we're able to access.
Yeah.
And I've found lately that people are saying they've discovered their soulmates in this realm, but They, they don't have, a physical being they can relate to, but they've become consumed by this lover they've encountered in this other dimension. And to me, that's like screaming, like, wait a minute, what are you allowing access to you? Talk to me about, is that something that you've heard of before, and is there any danger in that? It just seems like it could be to me.
Totally, yeah. I hear about it all the time, and that actually was being reported in the early alien abduction reports, let's say, where a love obsession occurred, but sometimes the linking up occurred either on the ship, for example, physically, but more often than not, there was like these astral sexual unions between these two targeted partners, basically organized by the aliens, and they would have these, energetic astral sexual unions, which were actually quite pleasant usually for them. It's just that it was being mediated by these other entities that were probably feeding. But sometimes what happens is that there's an entity, let's say it's attached to someone. This is a common report, and I wrote about it in The Dark Side of Cupid, where, let's say, someone is partially possessed or they got an attached entity that could be a lizard type, could be another type, and then that entity will actually astrally visit you, let's say the target of their affection and their vampirism, and they'll have these astral sexual unions with them, sometimes in the guise of the persona of the person they're hosting, or sometimes it's just straight, like the reptilian or the straight entity, or they could use any image, but they'll continually do this, like these astral sexual attacks or unions or whatever. So sometimes they're pleasant, sometimes they're very unpleasant, and they just won't stop. And, sometimes that's why people come to me. It's like, I can't stop this entity from, visiting me, and it's activating my kundalini. It's sucking off my energy.
Yeah.
So they report things like that. So it is dangerous. I think that unless you really know what you're doing in terms of interdimensionally traveling, you could run into these vampires because they're very rampant in the lower realms, so lower astral realms.
Thank you for that.
Now, you spoke about the one lady who had the overshadowing of the reptilian being that she actually saw come into her partner's body as he was about to climax and to feed off of that energy, and they can only stay here for a they can only actually be here for a very short period of time, and then they withdraw again and take the energy. Can you tell us a little bit about how she described that and what she did about that? What do you do about that when you? Yeah. I mean, she obviously had her vision to be able to see that. Was it actually with her eyes, or was it more of like with her third eye? And what did she do about that?
It was her third eye that she observed this. And oftentimes that's when you see it, because sometimes when you're having sex, you're kind of in a relaxed state, and it might be more apparent. But it tends to show up in those times, too. That's where a lot of times people actually observe that taking place. So in her case, I think it was one of those temporary things until he became permanently corded up with the entity, and then she did mention that after the courting, it's like the permanent courting, there was a real shift in his behaviors. Instead of it just being a sporadic thing that she noticed now and then, it was a permanent behavior change, and even with a smell, even with a pheromone smell change. So, I mean, of course it shocked her, and she didn't want to have sex with him anymore after she realized he was, corded up, and plus the energy bodies. I mean, once they get full of entities, that can contaminate your own energy field, and then you're linked up with their entities, and you can be attacked through them just by having sex with them. So it's like, it's a whole nother level of sexually transmitted disease. You know what I mean? It's you have to be really careful. So she basically, stopped having relations with him, and of course encouraged the therapy and the healing, and she did her own healing and therapy and meditations, and actually that he didn't even like it when she went into meditation. She reported that the entity within him would get really, really freaked out and anxious, would try to keep her from meditating because it didn't want her to get into these higher states of consciousness. It was kind of funny, actually, that it was such an obvious shift in behavior and, characteristics.
Well, I would say that most of the people listening to our show tonight have a higher awareness of what's happening, and there are a lot of the younger crowd that we see. They go out drinking, they go to parties, and they may they may have sex with several different people. They may have several sex partners, and they don't understand that they're actually sharing that energy from one person to another, or if they're courted, they're basically creating an opportunity for these other people to get possessed by these vampires. So it's really important that we know that the person that we're sharing our energies with, there's such a intimate sharing going on. Could you explain a little bit about how we do share energies with someone else during sexual intercourse, and how we could possibly be opening ourselves up to being possessed?
The sharing energies can actually happen even if you don't have sex, even if you share energies, even if you're, let's say, astrally meeting. That's a way of sharing energies even without physical contact, and that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's always the thing. Whenever you have intimacy with another person, you take on their energy, and you can take on their entities and take on their moods and all kinds of things. So that's something to be mindful of. I think, it could be dangerous.
Yeah, well, I think we've all found ourselves in the position. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think you find out later. I think women in general, because we have a more receptive nature, we're more likely to pick up energies from our partners or actually tune into that. And I think there's a reason for it. just being receptive in nature, we take on energies, and it takes us longer to heal from a bad relationship too. And that's, I think that's in the studies itself, is that it just takes a woman longer to heal in some ways from a bad relationship, because you take on so much of their energy, and it damages your own energy body as well. I've had people report that, they've had to get clearing after clearing after clearing, and a lot of emotional healing to be clear of like one of these psychopathic types, and then, years of just abstinence in some ways, just to clear up and then to rebuild their energy field from the damage done. So,
well, these beings have been, the higher level have been termed as archons, and they're basically, they are jealous of our creativity, especially the female energy that's, awakening on the planet, and they're not able to create. They don't have a connection to source, and they're not able to create things. They can only copy things or change things. And in the show that you did with my friend Andrew Fisher on Nature of Reality Radio, you talked. He asked you about these malevolence as far as the hierarchy goes, and I'd be really interested if you would please share with our listeners that same conversation about who's basically on the top of the reptilian pyramid, and kind of how it goes, how the other ones kind of answer to the top dude.
Yeah, well, that's actually has been a learning process for me. What I might have thought 10 years ago is certainly not what I know today. And it's just through observation and clearing, healing, and then talking to more and more aware people and more healing practitioners. So what I learned, I learned a lot through not only Barbara Bartholic and my own personal experiences and the ones that I wrote about, but also other healing modalities where I talked with other clearing practitioners who may have worked with different spirit releasements or exorcisms. And then just observing, like, for example, the holographic kinetics Aboriginal Dreamtime Healing that Steve Richards is the one who created that. His practitioners, he teaches people to release entities as well as traumas through his method. And so he has a way of being able to identify these beings based on his experience of clearing different levels of entities and how they're observed. So reptilians are just part of that, and they're not even at the top. So from his perspective, the lower ones would be, spirits, thought forms, entities, some different kinds of aliens, and then aliens have their own hierarchy, and then you've got the reptilians and draconians, and at the top of that would be what he calls the winged serpent types, which I think might be similar to some of the literal angels or fallen angels because of the wing kind of thing. But those ones actually remain hidden, and they're much more difficult to find. They're not as reptilians are actually easy to spot when they're in somebody. You can pretty much tell. And when removing them, they tend to growl and fight and be really angry and writhe around kind of like a serpent. And Draconians do too. But so there's different ways that you could observe these beings. But the higher level ones, I think even the winged serpent, I wonder if there's something higher than that. And one of the types that Dr. Malanga was able to identify in working with many abductees, where he figured that these alien entities were acting as parasites, interdimensional parasites, and they were linking into the mind and the spirit or the energy body of the person. And that there was different kinds of beings and a hierarchy of them, the highest of which he discovered, the primordial man. He calls him the primordial man, and he's kind of like a father figure. He called him Adam Kadmon in another article called Genesis. There's actually 3 articles. And then most of them are in Italian. I think 2 of them are in English. But he was able to identify at the top the high-level head honcho was this father figure type. But he didn't necessarily appear like an evil entity. He actually had both good and evil at the same time. He was playing both sides of the coin. And he actually was the one linking into the highest part of our soul, so that we kept reincarnating and going back to him instead of going beyond that. So there are actually creator beings that go beyond even the primordial man, that goes back to, and he has a whole cosmology of that based on his research. And so we really have to get beyond these other creator gods to get to the final, basically, evolution or liberation.
Yeah,
so we've been trapped here.
Different levels.
Yeah, we've been
trapped
here.
The thing is, they play good and evil, though. These false gods, they play good and evil, and you really don't know until you run into them and you have personal experience with them. Because what I've noticed in some of these more, let's say the more aware love bite cases, where let's say a person has had many different relationship setups, where every man they were with, it turns out that what they realized much later was that it was this head father figure that was actually intervening and orchestrating all of these, and then literally going inside the body of each partner, so that they were able to recognize that it was the same high level being who was actually orchestrating the whole thing and being in all these different love bite partners. I know it sounds absolutely bizarre, but it's something.
No, it sounds like that Pindar. When you hear the stories of the Pindar.
I don't know. All I know is that he plays on both sides of the fence, and he will reincarnate your soul back and forth. So it's almost like in some ancient mystic literature, and I know that it's very controversial, that they sometimes call him the father or the beloved figure, and they think that your soul is one with that being, but really that's only halfway up, that you have to go beyond that to actually become free, and you don't know it until you face it over and over again, until you challenge the authority.
Yeah.
Try to separate yourself from this one. You realize he's linked in with a lot of the false patriarchal religions.
Absolutely.
So it's like, oh my God, how far did this rabbit hole go? So
I
have
a question about something that's really prevalent, especially among the younger and younger generations. And we're talking about this Kundalini energy and sexual energy and love bites and all of this. It seems now pornography is taking the place of human connectivity. And it seems to be even that genre, like pornography in general, has become so extreme that sex has become more recreational or sport and removed the human aspect, the connection, that the sacredness of that energy exchange or pairing, so to speak. Talk to me about what could be behind what's going on there that's affecting us as a society.
Well, I think that's an example of the increased perversion and corruption of sexuality in terms of the artificiality and the copying. It's like basically the archons have moved in to suck off that energy and find the perfect modem for that to happen, all the while feeding in mind control programming and basically rewiring the brains of the people. I mean, I saw a talk on TEDx, and it was some man talking about how porn affects men in terms of sexuality and relationships and impotence, but the alarming thing was that when someone engaged in pornography at a young age, when they were still not quite developed into a man or a woman, I suppose, let's say early teens all the way through adulthood, it actually rewires your brain and your arousal mechanism so that you don't respond in the same ways that you would normally if you didn't have
desensitizing us, I feel like.
So it desensitizes and disconnects that in your brain so that the emotional connection is absent and the arousal will only happen in certain situations, which actually leads to impotence in real relationships.
Right.
So it's
well,
really
do you think that would be an avenue for us to be opening ourselves to maybe parasites that are shared or traded or sort of downloaded to us energetically via the internet? Do you think that would be something to be considering?
Yes, absolutely. Not only that, but I heard an interview, and I try to remember who the person being interviewed, but it was Project Avalon with Christine Megan, with a young MILAB guy who was a whistleblower who's been in one of these secret projects. And as part of his knowledge and being in these secret black op projects, there was obviously knowledge of the technology with artificial intelligence and the kinds of things that could be transferred through computers and computer technology. And they talked about after they had, let's say, discussed a lot of these secret things on forums, that they noticed these weird, like shadow-like spider entities, like around their computers, or they would see it in the shadow of their eye, like you know how you see entities from the shadow of your eye, like floating, darting around. And so this was something that actually even Miles Johnson talked about. When he was in the broadcasting industry, he talked about these things called the black scuttlers, which were like these little spider-like entities that would crawl around on these broadcasting equipment, and also in the technology with the sound and with the computers and all of that, there was something living, like an AI, living consciousness and technology that was being literally transferred through certain forms of technology. And this is the danger of a lot of AI and a lot of the things that are coming through computers now, that I don't think people really know, but people in the Black Op projects are very concerned about, that there is a danger here, that this is a mode of transmission of things that you may not be aware of. So, and including the subliminal mind control programming that's always going on. So, and that goes on in television. It's been going on for years. So this is one reason why I put out the Jonathan Adam Pence videos, because he clearly defined how he became aware of this, what he saw, and then he went and showed it on videos and audios, like this hypnosis one, where he basically shows what's happening and how they're doing it, how they play their game, and how they mind control you, so that if you want to be clear of these influences and these interdimensional attacks and stuff, you basically close your perceptual field to these kinds of ways that they're getting in, so that you could actually connect with your spirit, your creator spirit, which gives you all knowledge and wisdom of the truth instead of the fake shit that's coming in through a lot of the media and the TV and computers and God knows what. So it's like we're being, filled up with this archontic fake consciousness technology. We just call it the cancer consciousness, because that's what it is. I mean, it is. It's a virus to humanity. Yeah. So we need if you want to have the whole solution thing, which is what I'm concerned with, it really goes back to sacred relationship, not only between family members, but between men and women, with sacred love, sacred sexuality, sacred relationship, and nurturing that bond based on a true understanding, and not only of each other's individual differences and honoring those strengths and differences, but really understanding what goes behind all the different spiritual traditions and religions and even the myths, to start questioning what those sources are and why they keep favoring patriarchy. There's something wrong with that. There's something inherently wrong and damaging with that. I mean, it's obvious by just observation over time. You just look and you'd see, this is ridiculous. So we really need to clean up this planet,
Just that.
Well, I'd like to get a little bit further woo-woo on you as far as the spiritual aspect goes of how we can clean up this planet. I mean, on N5D we talk about basically the Earth is raising her vibration, and we have been tracking her Schumann resonance, which is the vibrational resonance that, I think she started out at 7.83 for a very long time, and now she's been up as far as like 8.7 recently. And, all of the people who are listening here have been going through they're raising their vibration and they're clearing and having, been following the articles. And, we're basically made out of the same materials as the planet. And when she is raising her vibration, it causes our water and our molecules to vibrate faster as well to keep up with her. Now, in your opinion, Eve, is this how we're going to basically shake them off of us, is, by raising our vibration, like shaking off fleas eventually?
Well, it's our responsibility to do the healing work and the clearing, to raise our consciousness to connect directly not only with the planet but with the larger creative spirit of the all that is, which is inside of us. So that's definitely a part of raising the vibration of the planet as well. I think the planet is very conscious of that, and we're helping each other. But it's going to take time because the only way to really connect more deeply to that is to have the love and the intention in your heart of doing so, but also being able to be willing to heal and clear and face our own dark side, our own traumas, and disengaging from those systems and things which feed the cancer consciousness, so to speak, and completely disengaging and no longer feeding those systems, which that's probably part of the problem, because we become really dependent on a lot of the systems which are really the vectors for the cancer consciousness. So it's,
we have to be aware. We have to be aware, and that only really happens when you do kind of wake up. There seems to be a time in everybody's life who has had this certain shift in their consciousness that, oh my God, like to make this 180-degree turnaround, and they realize, they start to study, and they realize that their thoughts are creating energies, and they realize from people like you how to recognize toxic relationships, and they sometimes whereas before they were just blind to it, and now all of a sudden they're able to see. Things are becoming very easy to discern. A lot easier to discern. I think the more that people work on themselves and raise their vibration, I think it just starts opening the doors to being able to do what we came here to do. And I think that I really enjoyed when you were talking to Andrew Fisher about how when we're changing, when we do this in the now, we're changing the past. And I was wondering, the past lifetimes where we've, maybe been caught in this several times. I was wondering, did we sign like some contracts under duress to, besides being in the false light in between lives, where they use karma against you and talk you basically into feeling guilty and coming back again and again and again so they can feed off of you. But do we have these contracts that we may have signed to that already assign one of them, like a handler, like you said to us, before we're even born?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe that these things have been discovered in different healing sessions, like holographic kinetics, for example, or other forms of healing and clearing, where people have basically found out through, let's say they're communicating with their spirit, or they're doing muscle testing or dowsing to find out the truth, and they may discover that, they made these agreements before they came into incarnation, or they call them agreements of entrapment that can happen as a result of whatever the conditions are to come here. And there's a lot of speculation on that, but I think there's something to it. I think there's something about how we agree to something without knowing we're agreeing to it, simply because we don't know the rules of the game, and that there's sneaky ways in which these beings could get us into an agreement of entrapment based on, that's how they're playing their game. It's like a cheap used car salesman.
They do it for every mortgage and car loan and all of the university loans. So it's the same trick, passive
consent. And the mortgage, that you're taking on, or the non-disclosure agreement with the company you work for. You always have to look at the fine print, and why do you have to make all these agreements? And one of the interesting things that we discovered in holographic kinetics, which is I like Steve Richards' work, but one of the things they discovered was one of the ways in which you can get these attached entity beings, let's say reptilians and draconians in particular, was through invocation, through ritual or vows and agreements in different spiritual traditions. Then you get one of these things linked up to you, and then it'll stay with you lifetime after lifetime until you become aware of it and know how to clear it out of your system. Otherwise, they keep messing with you lifetime after lifetime. And
I think we've scared the shit out of enough people tonight. I was hoping that we could. I'm hoping that we can let's go through some basic. Let's go through some basic things that can help people, clear their energies, clear these past life agreements, clear the cords, cut the cords from any, I would say there's a question in the chat room from Mark Cavell, and he said, could at least 85% of humans be interfered with by mind control? And I will also throw in, on that, I would say most all of humanity is affected by this. Wouldn't you say? And how can we do some basics, and then we can figure out? It's kind of like process of elimination. We do the basics, and then we figure out what's left, and we start to tackle that.
Yeah. Well, the basics are really getting into touch with our own unhealed wounds and blind spots that we have in our own lives. Let's say, healing and clearing the traumas. And a lot of times we don't know we have them until someone brings that to our attention through, let's say, an interpersonal relationship, and it could be, our blind spot. So we have to be aware and willing to heal and clear our own wounds, because that in and of itself, just by the clearing of traumas, it clears trapped energy, and also could be mind belief programs attached to those traumas that recreate certain patterns in our life and recreates reality. So we have to clear
until
those
you
things.
See it.
Yeah, and so what happens
it'll
is you
keep
get
coming up.
Yeah, you get an extra dose of energy and awareness each time each trauma or issue is healed and cleared, and that's essentially what lifts the veil of your perception and also connects you more deeply to your spirit. So that's what's important to get to the power to overcome. But the problem is people have this notion that, I don't need counseling, I don't need healing, there's nothing wrong with me, and they'll blame it on somebody else, or they'll think there's shame associated with somebody who's going to counseling or getting hypnotherapy or going to get a clearing, and so they just avoid the shit, basically, and that's how they stay disconnected and disempowered and all easily mind-controlled. So when you think about it, how many times in your life, I know that I've seen this in people who come in for counseling. Usually the woman comes in first for a couples issue. She's the one who tends to be hurting more profoundly enough to want to go and do something about it, and then the husband just has to drag them into counseling. And it's not always that. It could be the other way around. But it's like you have to become aware to deal with the issue before anything is resolved and any, veil is lifted at all. So the traumas actually trap us from our spirit and can take away our awareness just from the trauma itself. So in order to have the awareness and the power, we have to clear those traumas and we have to clear those blind spots. And that's how you deal with the problem. And the problem is that in this patriarchal culture, there's limited value placed on these things because they consider it subjective and really not necessary. And so really you go back to the differences between men and women and how we function in a patriarchal world. Okay, so what kind of values do you think are going to be predominant in a patriarchal world? Think about it. What do you see in the world today?
Well, greed and war, aggression, the power struggle. Right, survivalism.
Or irrationalism, scientific things, avoiding the emotional inner realms of healing and subjective things. They're just not, they're just marginalized. They're really not that important. Right. I can't tell you how many times I've been told by a rational male or an ex-husband or whatever you want to call it that just basically completely marginalized and minimalized everything that I thought was important as
well,
a woman,
back in the 50s and the 40s, there was an actual medical diagnosis that's called, women's histrionics. So you've got women's hysteria, so you're meant to be fitted at the asylum.
Oh, my God.
And I will tell you, do you know what the treatment for that was? That's where the inception of the vibrator came from. And that's how they sorted out hysterical women.
I saw that movie. It was ridiculous. It was just, actually we're lucky that we've evolved even from the 50s because, things were a lot worse even in my mom's time being raised in a Southern Baptist community where they literally made women who got pregnant before marriage, you have to confess their shame and all this kind of bullshit in front of a whole church who was just feeding off the energy because it's totally reptilian controlled, these churches. So it's just amazing what kinds of belief systems they stuff down our throats, and you wonder why the world's all fucked up. I mean, it needs to be balanced, and the trouble is in the world now it's still mostly valued on male, rational, logical, scientific, objective systems of belief and thought and perception. So what's the problem is that the perception is limited to the males who are running the show in the primary patriarchal world. And so I read about this in books that talk about the basic differences between men and women and our perceptions and what's important to us and how we process reality, how we react to stress, how we perceive reality. And so really we're having a tunnel vision of what's going on in the world. And that's why we're not getting the solutions, because the tunnel vision hasn't opened up to allow the feminine expansive awareness to really have a greater position of control and practical workability in the world. I mean, you hear about it, but it's not really enacted because the control systems are still really, they're strongly held by the patriarchal systems still. When you look at...
Absolutely. And we can't solve a problem with the same state of mind that caused it, and that's been the issue here. And I'd just like to point out that, all of this conversation about the divine feminine and those feminine nurturing qualities are not just, that has nothing to do with gender, so that those qualities are also in our male counterparts, and those are things, like, again, we work out in the group and on the show, that we need to integrate and embrace in all of us, and that force doesn't equal power, so that's something we all would do well to take heed and recognize.
Yeah, and I like that approach because that's actually a Taoist approach where we understand that even within a woman we've got the masculine nature and within a man we have the feminine nature, and being able to be more equal and balanced inside of ourselves. Absolutely. And in ways that we can actually understand the other gender and be able to interact and communicate in a way where we bring out our best qualities and strengths and really nurture that connection between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I
think that's so important, because, like I said, it's not. We've done the competitive route. We've done that for eons and eons, and now it's not about women instead of men. It's like, let's allow the men a safe space to step down from the aggressive stance, and that and the flip side of that is the women, that we have those masculine traits that allowed us to survive through these times, give us the power to recognize our own courage. And to me, just swapping a little, or just metering the balance that we have inside of us is what's going to help us carry forward together, instead of saying, well, not this way, just that way. No, if we, tweak this down and tweak this up a little, I think that's where the secret lies, because we have to get it done together, because the feminine, the creative, the nurturing, all of those qualities, they need security. They need expansion. They need that also, those masculine traits that help creation to continue and carry on.
Yeah, it definitely has to be a balance, and in order for that to happen. And, I mean, that's why I'm so interested in, how can we have solutions for this in a really basic way that we can do this in our own lives and relationships and really solve the problem, and by understanding our true natures and really working with that.
Yeah, and I write a lot about this. I'd like to share some personal experiences. I mean, I do really think that we do this one person at a time, and it starts with ourselves. And this balance that we're seeking is so important. I think that, personally, that some of the methods that I use to keep my energy field clear, which will open up the door for more balance, is I do a lot of open eye meditation. I don't do a lot. I do some closed eye meditations, but I do a lot of daydreaming and a lot of basic thought. I spend a lot of time. I do spend a lot of time by myself, even though I am in a relationship, because that's when I really get to connect with my higher self and my oversoul, and just go. I don't stop there. I just go straight back to source, and my imagination is huge, because I use that to imagine that connection back to source again, opening up even further and further, and expanding that light in my heart chakra and in my, just basically in my whole being, and then sharing that light with the planet and sharing that light with all the rest of humanity. So another thing that I do, I wrote an article called Cutting Energetic Cords, How to Maximize Your Energy Flow. And sometimes you can have these blocks from, these either attachments or implants, or just carrying energies from past lives, or carrying energies that you accumulated through this lifetime. And so you can find that on N5D by just go to the search button on the top right-hand side and just type in energetic cords. Another thing I like to do to stay clear is I love water. India and I were talking about water. She just moved away from the water into the mountains. You can get it, if it's the right time of year, you can get into the ocean. Salt water has a lot of healing, clearing properties. Use your imagination, talk to the water, thank the water, ask the water to help clear you. And if you can't do that, you can get into a bathtub with half a cup of like Himalayan sea salt or any other kind of sea salt, and a half a cup of baking soda. And again, speak to the water and ask the water to help clear you. You can also sage yourself, and you can sage your house and use your imagination and intention, and call on your guides, the true guides that are here to help you, because we all have help. We can't forget that they're here, and I'm not talking about the ones that will just step up to the plate out of the false light and want to help, but I'm talking about your true guides that are here. Let's see. Another thing is I always try to ground myself to the planet with my imagination, imagining that my feet are roots, and that I have a cord that goes down and connects to the center of the planet, and I acknowledge Gaia, and I thank her for, giving me a body and for giving me this opportunity in this lifetime to clear these energies, because I do believe that that's what we came here to do, to wake up, to clear these energies that we've been carrying as well as, from lifetimes, but as well as, in this lifetime, and to integrate those aspects of ourself from our soul that have been lost and been trapped. And basically that will take care of all of our past lifetimes. That will take care of a lot of things when we start focusing on that. And we can ask Gaia to help us with that, because she knows how to do that. And so staying centered in your heart too as well, changing the way that you think. All these things will raise your vibration, and whether you call it, if you want to call it that, or whether you can call it naturally clearing, I don't think that these beings would want to connect to you, or could possibly even continue to attach to you, if you follow this type of protocol. Now, if you've got an implant from being abducted, Eve, how is somebody going to clear something like that? And how do they have one?
Well, sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're energetic. Most of them people clear by an energetic, psychic kind of procedure, or something like holographic kinetics can do that, or the methods that Dr. Corrado Malanga designed to clear alien parasites and interference. And it's really a guided visualization using imagination, connecting to your highest eternal self, so to speak, and clearing that out, and then clearing out the attachments and whatever traumas that might be holding them in. So sometimes it takes a process of time of like peeling layers of an onion when we go through the clearing process, because sometimes, you could go to somebody and they'll take it out, and then within days, the problem came back. And so it has to be, I believe that the most effective way of clearing is through distinct awareness of how it got there, or that it's even there, and then using your power and connection to your highest source, basically, to remove it, and then having true insight on how and why it happened, and that awareness that you have seems to be like the power factor to really remove it. Because if you just kind of rely on somebody else to do it, a lot of times the problem comes back where it doesn't truly get resolved, because it really takes your release of your own traumas and your awareness and insight to recreate what you want that gives you the sticking power for something to basically stay gone out of your life.
And I think love right now, is just the biggest thing that I use. Being in love, showing love, just being love, and that's just the highest vibration that we can emit right now. And if you don't have a partner, you can tremendously love yourself. And sometimes that it's even better than, sharing a sacred relationship with a partner, because, that will heal you and get rid of, a lot of energy blocks by loving yourself. It's one of the things that I really like to remind people to do. I mean, if you can really look in the mirror and stare at yourself and accept every single part, every bit of you, and send love to yourself, that takes some practice, because there's a lot of programming that we have to clear about the way we look, how we feel about ourselves. And we don't look like the people on television. We don't look like the models. We don't look like the actresses.
Yeah.
So
I think love is the wild card, though. It's often talked about, but sometimes it's hard to connect to on a greater scale, like the greater creative spirit way that the Jonathan Adams videos talk about that I've been putting out. It's really like love is the wild card in terms of your intention, and once we have that working through us in a greater way, nothing can stop that. And I think that's the one thing that is the power over all. And I think just having the intention to love, even though sometimes we feel like we can't feel it all the time, just having the intention and then letting go and allowing that greater, I don't know, you can call it your higher self or the greater all of all that is, that to flow through you, then that's when the magic really happens. And I think it's just the willingness and the intention will just make that happen.
Absolutely. I agree. I think another suggestion for people who find it hard to connect or to get into that space of just appreciativeness, it's like go connect in nature or spend time with an animal, and it kind of helps you be completely in the now. And once you get hooked on that, it's addictive. It really is.
It's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I had something happen at the park the other day that was totally cool, and it was like that. I had a white wolf show up in a meditation that was showing me, that it was there protecting, and then the next 2 days after that, going to a park, I see this white wolf-like dog that was more like an Alaskan husky, and it ran up to me and jumped, and it kissed me and licked me in the face. It was just like the one I saw in my meditation, and I didn't even know it. It was just so cool, because it was one of those in-the-moment confirmation that, there are good things with us that are still communicating through everything, and usually through nature. It usually happens, so that's cool. Yeah.
It is. And I'd like to remind our listeners that we have about 20 minutes left in our show, and if you have a question, go ahead and call in now, 646-716-8890, to ask Eve or India or myself a question or to comment about what we've been talking about. Eve, I was wondering if you could explain to me or to the listeners just basically, how are they actually connecting physically, or how are they actually connecting? Is it through our chakras, or is it through our brain? They call our brain the reptilian brain, or is it a little bit of both, or what?
Oh, well, if there's an entity, oftentimes it is through a chakra, through a cording that will attach through that energy center. Although I sometimes think there's other methods that can take place. Like, let's say if a magician wanted to connect with you, they might connect you through let's say a piece of hair or skin or even a blood sample, that they're able to connect in with you through an essence of you. That can happen. So, or even just
in my mind, I think there's like a data bank of all of that newborn blood that they store and the little heel pricks and stuff. I think there's this huge database somewhere where we've all been tagged. But then again, my mind does those things.
That's why aliens put in implants, and they do them in different energy centers to affect and deviate energy communication so that we have an incoherence a lot of times with our meridian system, so that the awareness is stunted, and they could basically siphon off energy or keep us from connecting internally even with our own energy system.
Absolutely. And then throw in genetically modified foods and some vaccines and spray some chemtrails and, let's heal them with this allopathic sort of, mentality that keeps people sick and dependent on all sorts of tablets and that kind of thing. So it's a wonder that people are waking up at the rate that they are, but look at the things, the pollution in the air, the microwaves and cell phones and things that we're gladly marching and queuing up to use. However, what's underlying this technology? Is it really for our convenience, or what else might be utilized, by the same technology that we look at as convenience?
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be used for good, like the Internet has been helpful for so many people connecting globally. Yeah. It's been wonderful even for business as well. It's just that one wonders if some of its motivation was like a Trojan horse introduction into our reality to transfer in this AI kind of consciousness, and that some people believe that's what Roswell was about, or what some of these new technologies are about. So
absolutely, I have someone very close to me that has actually said that he has come back from the future to make sure that we do not go down the technology timeline, because from the being that he is in the future is just definitely not where we want to go. It's like, it's all AI and we become basically zombies and robots. So it's very transhumanism, exactly.
Ooh,
and very important that we learn how to, we talked about clearing. But let's talk about basic protection that we can, maybe energy fields that we can put up around us once we've, cleared ourselves and healed our auras again. And we need to keep our auras strong, like, imagining an eggshell very strong around us, golden light or a white light or whatever color you'd like to use. But what other kind of, Eve, you deal with people all the time that are possessed. How do you protect yourself?
There's so many things that you could use, devices that might be helpful. Like those orgonite things, or purifying your water, or what do they call it, tensor coils, or things that are supposed to deflect and transmute cell phone energy and computer energy emissions and EM that's coming through there's a device for everything these days. But really, I think connecting powerfully to your highest essence and source is in love is probably the most powerful of all things, really, because we could have gizmos up the yin-yang, and it's just endless pursuit of getting all these gizmos and still not working sometimes, So I say connect more deeply with your creative spirit and healing love and clearing your traumas, and just using your common sense, really.
I do like the Orgon idea.
Definitely eating clean, eating clean food.
Yeah, as much as possible. There's so many people that really are in situations in the spiritual community, metaphysical community, that are, don't have money right now. So, you've got to forgive yourself. If you have to eat the crap, at least you can bless it. Send positive vibrations of love into your food, and every bite you take, you're just like, I freaking love this, just anything creative you can think of, because just, there's so many things that their basic agenda is destruction of the entire race on the planet. So we've got to get that out of our mind, and we've got to think of very creative ways to work around this, because even though they are even though they are multidimensional and they do have a leg up on us as far as the technology they're using, the methods they're using, what they don't have is that connection to source and love.
Right.
And that is how we can make ourselves basically vibrate out of their reality. They can't follow us where we're going.
Yeah, I think that's the only solution ultimately is to, and let go of the belief systems that are no longer serving us, that are false, possibly, and just really it's more of a letting go of all that is not of the purest essence of creative spirit, so to speak, and of the earth, and just letting go so that it doesn't have a hold on us. It's how it links in with our consciousness. We believe in it and think we need it, and that's the linking in,
True. There's so much work to do. I want to talk about channeling, if you wouldn't mind. It's a little off topic, but I was just, wondering, what percent of channeling is truly, people channeling from their higher selves, or would you say that the majority of channeling is probably from, like, the false light or the tricksters?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the person, really, how clear they are in their own walk, in their life and their practice. Because, there's some really, really good psychics who are tuned in, and then there's some who I think they're getting messages from, like a draconian or a head reptilian or whatever, or the false gods. So, you really have to assess it through the person.
How can you tell the difference? I mean, is it true that when they hear words in their head that it's most likely either the government mind control system or the false light beings, versus if they were to just get more like thought packets? Is that, in your opinion, is there truly a difference on how it comes through?
Well, there's lots of ways that the voice-to-skull technology and the artificial telepathy can work, and that usually happens more audio and imagery, so you have to learn how to just basically discern the difference between, let's say, a true telepathic message between you and another person or another being and the false stuff. So it really takes hit and miss just experiencing it yourself, really, to know. But I think that the higher forms of communication tend to be on higher realms that are developed. They kind of like get a huge packet, and then it's basically translated into an understanding in your being, and then you might translate it into words later, or however you want to translate it. But some say it's more of a higher level transference that takes place when it comes from the higher realms. So really, I don't know if I'm a good judge of this. I just have to take things as they come, even in my own experience. Just
That's true.
Assess later. You don't know.
We all do.
You don't know until later. It's like how accurate was this information? Where is it coming from? What does it feel like? What is it doing to my life? Do I really need to listen to it? Is it really me? You can go on and on and on.
That's really important. That self-analysis. We should all be doing that. I just want to ask you before we get to the end of the show, I know my listeners will be really interested and keen to know more about if they have any concerns about these types of situations that you've shared tonight. Where would they turn? Are you available to help? Do you do sessions with the clearing or the identification of what might be the scenario they're dealing with, or do you have suggestions for such or something like that?
Yeah, I do. I do sessions with people, usually Skype or telephone, and that could be anywhere from just consulting to basically, share what's going on and get a sense of what's happening, and then also clearing through like a hypnotherapeutic process, more or less. And sometimes I include Dr. Corrado Malanga's techniques along with my own to clear, and sometimes I refer out depending on what I think the person needs. And, of course, my books are available on Amazon, and through my website you can get information on all of that. So,
what was the name of your books again?
The Love Fight? The Love Fight is the first one, Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships. And then The Dark Side of Cupid, Supernatural Love Affairs. Love Affairs is Supernatural and Energy Vampirism. That's the second one. And they're both available through Amazon, hard copy and Kindle. So, that gives you a good idea of how to identify what's happening and some strategies on solutions, too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I would really invite you to send anything that you'd like, an excerpt from any of your books, if you would like, or just to create an article of your own besides book to be published on N5D. We welcome your material, and we thank you for everything that you do in helping people to recognize these. Basically, could be the cause of a lot of problems in their lives, and most of the problems in their life, actually, because relationships be, your husband or your boyfriend or your wife or your girlfriend. It can also be, if they can't get to you and you're on a high spiritual path where you've really been shining your light and making that connection, well, they can try to bring you down by, going, unfortunately, to your loved ones, to your family, to your friends. And, it ends up costing you a lot of people in your life when you realize that you've tried to, explain to them what's going on, but if they haven't awakened to what's happening, they think you're the crazy one.
Right,
and,
I know.
A lot of times.
Awful. Yeah. They call you paranoid and all this. And actually, I was motivated to do an article some time ago, probably several months ago, to talk about what I call safe relationship, good character, and spiritual discernment, which was a real good basic on, how do I really identify, well, what is safe relationship? When you're awakening, you're going to run into a lot of these kinds of things. And to really assess, sometimes you have to take an inventory and really create new relationships, new safe relationships based on good character and also spiritual discernment as you become more aware, so that you surround yourself with safe people and supportive people to basically help support that awakening, so that you could help others as well. Because you don't want to stay stuck in toxic relationships or people who constantly are, coming at you to criticize you or to, cut you down or disempower you. So it's really important to even know what safe relationship is and what good character is, good old-fashioned good character. And it's amazing how many people don't really know. It's not something that's really discussed much, believe it or not. So I think that's real important.
It is. It's essential. I mean, if you don't have a partner who's doing their work as well and doing the clearing that they need to do, then unfortunately you're not going to vibrate your water at the same rate or be attracted anymore or be able to even communicate or understand. And it's usually happens naturally. If you think about the relationships you've had in the past, people just end up saying, well, I've changed a whole lot, or you've changed a whole lot, and people change, and we're just not happy anymore. Well, essentially, people are actually doing what we're talking about here. They're taking care of their blocks and moving on, and the other person isn't, or vice versa. So,
right.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to, any other topic that we didn't cover that you'd like to share with our listeners tonight?
Oh, I know what I forgot to mention. I'm actually planning to do a roundtable discussion event on a video conferencing format, probably sometime in January. The date's not set, but it's going to be on, the love bite, the twin flame situation, and how to identify if this is happening and solutions on that, because that actually comes up a lot in my work. So I want to do actually a whole panel discussion on that with different people who've had the experiences, or they're professionals in different realms where they deal with the whole twin flame thing or the love bite thing, and how to guard against it or to basically nurture the sacred love relationship. So that's coming up in January. I'm going to be doing that. So
that's great. And where could we find that again?
Actually, I'm going to be doing that through Rise Multiversity, which is a group of researchers where we do different kinds of events on a video conferencing format. So it's kind of nice because it's more interactive, and it's gives the person an opportunity to interact more than, let's say, a regular webinar or a radio show. So that would be kind of a nice way to bring something out and discuss it at more length.
Okay. Well, if you have about 5 minutes, I think we have a caller. Would that be okay with you?
Oh, no problem.
Okay, great. So, area code 913, thanks for joining us tonight. What is your name?
Hi, my name's Elaine.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for calling in. Did you have a question for Eve?
I do. If we're doing all this clearing and we peel it off like an onion, one layer at a time, how do we know when we're done?
That's a good question. Well, I suppose you never really know if we're completely done. I mean, since we are infinite consciousness ultimately, but I think you have a good idea based on how you feel and how your life is shifting, and that the more we clear, the better in harmony, and the more easy it is to connect with we can call it our higher self, and also the greater all that is. You're going to have a greater ability to connect with that and get guidance on a more clear, direct way as we do more clearing. So, and it cleans out your life, and it doesn't mean there isn't uncomfortable feelings along the way, because that does happen as a result of it. But you'll know by how you feel, really.
Okay. I agree. I mean, I think synchronicities have been something that have happened in my life to really show me that I'm on the right path, and that I'm doing the clearing that I need to do. So, like, numbers 1111, and all kinds of different. You just happen to wake up at 2:22 or 3:33. Sometimes, some people could say that that's the entities waking you up, but really, when you've really worked hard on yourself, I really think that that's more of a personal interpretation, and I like to think that those are my guides, letting me know that I'm on the right path.
Yeah, and plus, just staying with the intention of love, and it's kind of a purity of intention in your heart and soul, kind of gets you on that channel and that frequency of the communication coming through in those ways of where you want it to come from, And I think it all goes back to your intention and your purity of intention, because it does respond to that. It's very responsive.
Well, Elaine, did we answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, great. Well, thank you for calling in.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay, Eve. Well, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and you're being simulcast as well on Expanding You Radio.
Oh, thank you.
Yay, that's India. That's great. That's India's channel. She does a radio show as well, so we're kind of sharing you around.
Well, I appreciate being on the show and having some good co-hosts talk about really good things.
Yeah, I thought we could do some powerful divine feminine, a trilogy, a triangle of us tonight, and put everyone in the middle and send a lot of love to everybody. And they can, our listeners can find you at evelorgen.com, and that's EVELORGEN.com. And so thank you, Eve, for joining us, and we'd like to have you back in the future sometime when you have some, a new book or new material you'd like to promote. We'll be here for you. And like I said, if you'd like to, submit an article to N5D, we'd be happy to spread the word. That's what we're here to do. Just let us know.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You have a good rest of your evening.
I just want to say thank you for inviting me here, Michelle. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time. And Eve, I want to thank you and honor you for all the work that you do so tirelessly, as well as your amazing, wonderful husband, Bill. You guys are rebels in this love revolution in the very best way, and for that, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, Eve. India, if you'll hang on with us.
Okay.
India, hang on just a second, dear. I just have a couple of announcements, if you wouldn't mind just hanging with me for a second.
I'm right here.
Yeah, I just want to say that next week's guest on the Cosmic Awakening show is radio show host Missy Hill, and we'll be talking more about how to survive in this transformation that we're going through when we have one foot in the higher dimension and the other foot stuck in this dense third dimensional holographic reality that we see in front of us. And India, I want to thank you so much, girlfriend, and I hope you enjoy Colorado. And it's been my pleasure to host with you and to share with Expanding You Radio. And can you tell our listeners how they can find a little bit more about Expanding You Radio and yourself?
Expanding You Radio is on Blog Talk, just like this show is. So if you just look up Expanding You with expanding and the letter U all together, you'll find that network. So we do shows on science and technology, new paradigm living, sexual, energetic, anything that's pertinent to the now, relationships, all sorts of things. We've got medical shows that are on UK Health and other networks as well. So we're doing our bit to make sure that we are here to help expand you, and that expands me. So we're trying to coerce everybody into some unity. So you can find us on Facebook as well. Same name, Expanding You. Appreciate you, Michelle.
Now, do you have a set schedule, or do you just do whenever you feel like it?
It's programming 7 days a week, so whatever day you tune in, there's something going on. So it's different every single day. But yeah, we're trying to cover everything. And if any of the listeners, like I say, any of your listeners have something you want to bring forward, books you're writing, projects that you're working on, new science, technology, music, whatever it is, shoot it to us. We like to give, that's the people's platform. So if you've got something to bring forward, I invite you to share it with us on Expanding Your Radio.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Love to everybody out there tonight. Good night, everyone.
Namaste.